The Elves and the Shoemaker. There once lived a humble shoemaker who worked in a tiny shop at the edge of a quiet village. He was an honest man, kind to his customers, gentle to his wife, and faithful in his work. But despite all this, hard times had fallen upon them. At last, one cold winter evening, the shoemaker discovered that he had only enough leather left to make one single pair of shoes. He cut the pieces carefully, laid them neatly upon his bench, folded his tired hands, and prayed softly, Lord, you have brought us this far. Help us through one more day. With that, he put out his candle and went to bed. But sometime in the deep hours of the night, when the stars were bright and even the wind hushed itself, a curious thing happened. Out of the darkness came the pitter patter of tiny feet, the whisper of laughter, and the quick, cheerful tapping of small hands at work. By morning, when the shoemaker returned to his bench, the leather he had cut was gone, and in its place stood the finest pair of shoes he had ever seen. The stitches were so perfect, so delicate, that no human hand could have made them. That very day, a gentleman entered the shop, admired the shoes, and paid more coins than the shoemaker had seen in many weeks. With that money, he bought leather for 2 pairs of shoes. He cut the pieces before nightfall, arranged them neatly, and once again went to sleep. And again, just as before, the tiny feet came, the nimble fingers worked, and by dawn, 2 beautiful pairs of shoes stood upon the bench. This went on night after night. Whatever the shoemaker prepared, the unseen helpers finished. Business flourished, poverty lifted, joy returned to the small home. At last, the shoemaker said to his wife, We must discover who is helping us, for surely they deserve our thanks. So, one night near Christmas, they lit a single candle and hid themselves behind a curtain. The clock struck 12. The wind sighed softly outside. Then, there they came, 2 little elves, no taller than a teapot, with bright eyes, nimble fingers, and not a stitch of clothing on their backs. They scrambled onto the bench and set to work, hammering, stitching, pulling thread with such cheerful energy that the shoemaker and his wife could not help but smile. When the little creatures had finished and darted away into the night, the shoemaker's wife whispered, They have helped us out of pure goodness. We must repay them with kindness. So she set to sewing tiny shirts and jackets, trimming them with buttons no bigger than peas. The shoemaker worked beside her, crafting 2 perfectly fitted pairs of little leather shoes. On Christmas Eve, instead of setting out leather on the bench, they laid out the clothes. Then they hid themselves and waited. At the stroke of midnight, the elves skittered into the room. They climbed up to the bench, and there they stopped. Their eyes grew wide with surprise and delight. With little shouts of joy, they slipped into the jackets, pulled on the tiny breeches, buttoned the shirts, and stamped proudly into their new leather shoes. Then, hand in hand, they danced. Oh, how they danced, spinning and hopping, singing, Now we're boys so fine to see, why cobble more for others' feet? Laughing and capering, they skipped out the door and into the moonlit world beyond, and from that night on they never returned. But the shoemaker and his wife never forgot them, for though the elves' work had ended, the blessings they brought remained. The shoemaker prospered from that day forward, and every time he stitched a shoe or hammered a sole, he whispered a prayer of thanks for the little helpers who had brightened his world with their hidden kindness.